Welcome to the first episode of Just Joshing, a DC Hoop show. And for the first episode, I had to get kind of a special guest. This is one of the first Wizards creators I really was tapped into before I actually joined the beat last year. This is Greg Finberg. Greg, say what's up to the people.
How's it going? What's up, Josh? I'm honored to be the first guest. When Josh messaged me and told me that I'd be the first guest, I had to obviously clear my schedule and hop on. Josh does great work. I cover the Wizards, but Josh covers both the Wizards and the Mystics. So definitely go and make sure you give him a follow. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on as your first guest. I'm honored.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, when I first was joining last year, I kind of wanted to check like who were the big Wiz creators that, were driving the most enthusiasm. And you're at the top of the list because, I feel like the community you've built is kind of amazing, especially for a team that struggled so much in recent years. It's a testament to how hard you have to work to drive up that enthusiasm. It's not as easy as a team like the Lakers or something, so yeah, big ups for that. So going into the Wiz, man, the preseason's over. It just concluded last night. Who are your preseason MVPs? Cause I have a couple in mind, but I kind of want to hear your take first.
I mean, the number one, if you had asked me before last night's game against Detroit, I would have honestly out of nowhere probably said Marvin Bagley, just because I was completely pleasantly surprised by how good he's looked in preseason. But after what Keyshawn George did last night against Detroit, it's got to be him at the top for me. He had 20 points on 8 of 11 from the field, grabs a rebound, did 2 stocks. And on defense, like Cade got 16 and 12, but Keyshawn made everything difficult for him. So it's the two-way stuff. And we know his defense is elite. We knew it last year. But the offense at times wasn't the best. He wasn't the biggest creator for himself or for others. The three-point shot was in the low 30%. But this year, he seems so much more comfortable with the ball in his hands. Against Detroit, he had a couple where he just took his defender off the dribble, used his size to create space with the offhand. Hit some mid-range dumpers, had a couple and ones, knocked down a 3. He kind of just showed everything he could do. And when Bug got hurt, he played some point guard and he was running the show at like 6'8". And the guard skills he has, the athleticism, just to be able to do that at his size is so impressive. And to be able to see the defense is still there, but the offense has developed so much. You can't go really, I don't think, anywhere else but him. He just looks so comfortable. He looked like the best player in that Detroit game for Washington. So I definitely say George is like the number one. Obviously, I talked on Bagley at 18 and 11 against New York. Just thought he's been so consistent and played so well, especially on the glass, in the 3 games he appeared in preseason. So really liked him. CJ McCollum, again, he had 17 points against Detroit. Shot it efficiently from 3, I think 5 for 9. And he had another 20 plus points against Toronto in the opener. He's such a consistent scorer. I think I found this out the other day. He's averaged 20 plus points in 10 seasons in a row, 10 consecutive seasons, which is, again, in the NBA, not easy to have that consistency. So I had to have 3. I'd say them. Sarr's kind of on the outside looking in. He didn't play as much as them, so I'm not going to go and say he was like an MVP level, but definitely like what I saw from Alex. So I definitely go with those 3.
Staying on Sarr for a second. You're right. He didn't play as much, but what he did play, I liked what I saw because he was around the rim. And that's something that was an issue last year. I think he didn't really use his body correctly last year. He still was kind of learning the NBA game and kind of, going into his frame. He still was 19, so he's not even done growing yet. But I think he's using his body a lot better just around the rim, just using his size, getting to the rim and actually finishing, not shooting too many threes. It's okay if he shoots a couple of threes, but he should mostly be in the paint. And that's what he did this preseason. Last year he was kind of spamming threes a lot. It worked occasionally, but he wasn't very efficient. I think it was like 31%, 30.8, I want to say. So, it's good to see him mature in that aspect already going into only his second season. I think he's still 20. So that's awesome. But kind of a dark horse pick for me, by the way. I agree that Keyshawn's my number one. I think that's he kind of ran away with it last night, 20 and 6. But Will Riley is kind of my dark horse pick because this kid, I did not expect what he did against New York to happen. I kind of thought he'd, kind of play sparingly, kind of take longer to adjust. Maybe, I'm sure he'll still spend time with the go-go at some point this season. I'd be surprised if he didn't just because the rotation's so deep. But what he did against New York is still, it's against the backups, but still, it was impressive. I mean, 17 points, had a few boards as well. Very efficient shooting, was 7 for 11. And he was showing off a bag as a 6'10 guy or 6'9", 6'10 guy that was like, wow, this is like a jumbo guy. It kind of was a little bit shades of KD, the way he could just get space at that size, but also finish at the rack, has a jumper, you know what I mean? And I don't know, it's exciting because it's like this guy, whenever you look at the non-lottery picks, right? It's not always the correct mentality, but they naturally have like a bit of a lower expectation going in. It's just kind of the politics of the game, right? And for him to sort of hit the ground running in that way, and not to mention he also hit those shots at the end of the Raptors game that should have won the game from the line. But he is somebody who made a bigger impact early on than I expected, and I think that's exciting for a Wizards team that needs all the impact they can get out of these young guys. So Will Riley is definitely my dark horse pick. With someone like CJ, I think we kind of know what we're getting. I mean, it's great to see him still being consistent. He's a great player, but I think when it comes to this Wizards team, I'm focused primarily on these kids because they're the ones that the franchise is building around, But anyway, what were your thoughts on Will in general?
I thought, again, like going into the season, I thought that he had the tools, and I thought the same thing with Keyshawn. Like, you knew you were getting a 3-and-D wing. They're both around 6'8", and you're looking for them to steadily develop. And I think Keyshawn is way farther along at this point than I thought he'd be. And so maybe Will Riley at this point next year is like that, but he's already showed, like you mentioned, nobody expected what do you have, 17 points on 7 of 11 from the field or something like that. He played so well against New York. And he did it from 3. He did it off the dribble, like you mentioned. So like there's definitely, it's there, right? And you can see clearly why the Wizards decided that they can move back, and still be able to get a guy like Riley. They had to make that move. But you see everything there in that New York game. I think obviously he needs to get stronger. He needs to, and with that will come better defense as well. I just think, like you mentioned, the go-go makes too much sense, especially with how many pieces the Wizards could possibly put out there. I just don't know if Brian Keefe can say that he's a better option at this point than like Justin Champagnie, a guy that I think is great, and I still honestly don't even think will make the 8-9 man rotation. Like, will you play Will Riley over Whitmore or over Corey Kispert? Probably not. So I was pleasantly surprised. I think he's farther along than I maybe anticipated he'd be. But there's no rush, right? Like, you have your go for a reason. You have a lot of guys that you can play over him. And maybe in the second half of the year, if you decide to buy out guys like Middleton and McCollum, and you can maybe trade some pieces and then he can step into a role, that's probably ideal. I don't think you need to play him on opening night, but I'm pleasantly surprised. Like I said, with Bagley, I'm pleasantly surprised with Riley. I didn't think he'd be this far along, and it was the 3rd and 4th string guys for the Knicks. Like, it's not like he was doing this against Mikal Bridges, but it's still NBA talent. He's still a rookie, and it was still impressive.
Yeah, it's funny you said that about Bagley. Like, it's kind of amazing what the Wizards are doing with Bagley, Bagley was actually in the trade that got the Wizards Will Riley. It's kind of funny how connected all these things are sometimes with the moves. It's that trade was a pretty honestly, it was my favorite deal at the deadline. I think that the Wizards made was just because the value they got out of that. I mean, they took on Marcus Smart's contract just for a couple months, basically they bought him out later. But, they sent Bagley out to Memphis, and then Bagley ends up calling back anyway for another year. And then they end up getting the pick that they got Riley out of that. So, that's pretty awesome. It kind of shows you how valuable it is for teams to be able to clear their cap in today's apron era and all that stuff. I think the finances are so king. They always were king, but even more so now. And whenever you can take advantage of that, and we'll get to this more later, but the way the Wizards have taken advantage of their cap space and how they don't have to pay as big contracts as other better teams, they can really utilize that for now to help accelerate their rebuild. But we'll get to that later. I kind of touched on my surprise already of the preseason was Will Riley. Did you have any other surprises besides Bagley, of course?
I low key, this is like kind of like a sicko comment. I like Dylan Jones. He barely played. For like everyone's watching for like Sar and Ball, but I like what he did on the floor. I like this floor game overall, and especially with him kind of competing for that last roster spot. You have Brandon as well, Anthony Gill on the back end of the roster. I thought Dylan Jones in the last summer league game too. Like he didn't have a great summer league until the final game where he was really good. And I think he carried that pretty nicely over into the limited reps that he saw. But against Toronto, he played 7 minutes and was a plus 13 in those 7 minutes. I don't know if it was just that game, and I'm just thinking about that, but I did like what I saw from Jones, especially with him battling for that last spot with Branham. I mean, Corey Kispert had a good first half against Detroit. The second half wasn't great, but I was pleasantly surprised with just the attack he showed for a guy that came in as like the sharpshooter. You can't do anything else. And the ability, I think in year 4 at this point to like, he's developed all that, or maybe year 5, but he can put the ball on the deck pretty consistently. When he gets to the rim, like I'm expecting him to get fouled or I'm going to make a layup. So I've been surprised, I guess, with the overall development that I've seen from, I guess, year 1 to now from Kispert. I mean, other than that, you touched on Riley, you touched on Bagley. Obviously, I think I'm honestly a little surprised with how good Sar has been on the glass. I'm not surprised with how he's been more aggressive. You know, I thought that would be the case. But he's just been awesome. You know, he looks like a true center, I guess. And a lot of times last year, he looked like a power forward. So that'll open up a lot for the Wizards. If they have a guy that can clear the defensive glass, that can save offensive possessions and get second chance points and be as aggressive as he has been in the limited time he played in the preseason. I think that aspect of his game, I didn't know if that would be there this season, but from what I've seen, it is. So that was nice to see.
Yeah, it's funny, like about Sar, how Sar was more of a 4 last year. He was kind of like a stretch 4, like he'd always try to like kick out to 3, right? But like I said earlier, he was only hitting like 31%, which isn't really enough to be a stretch, you know. So I think he's much better suited inside, being like a real 5, like you said. Even though, you know, he would probably naturally coming in was more of like a 4 kind of, especially with that European play style, more spread out, you know, less physical. But I think him being physical with how big he is as a 7-footer, it just really suits him. And I'm excited to see him utilize that more this season, just because, like you said, the Wizards don't have a ton of guys to get boards. You know, they have a lot of wings, but they don't really have a lot of these, you know, those tall, long centers. So with him and Bagley, I think those are the two that are gonna, especially before the trade deadline with Bagley, who knows like what they'll do with Bagley later. But I think they really need Sar to be that guy. I remember over the offseason, the Wizards fans were kind of freaking out because they had no center basically because, you know, they had a ton of wings, but until they had Bagley, it was kind of like tricky. Like, really, it's just going to be Sar and Vuk, you know? So, I think they're in a much better place with that center wise than they were a few months ago. And yeah, with Jones, I think he can be maybe one of those last 2-way guys. We'll see. You know, it's kind of, those guys are kind of unpredictable somewhat, you know, like I don't think most people were predicting what would happen with Champagny, you know, before last season started, you know. Those guys kind of will just come out of nowhere and they kind of just pop out. I did cover a few G League games last year, and I remember Jalen Noel was like balling, like, you know, 30, 40 point games, but he never really got his chance with the Wiz, you know. It sucked. And now I just looked it up. He's with the Pels now. So I hope he does well there. But yeah, you know, so sometimes some guys get a chance, others don't, right? I remember also last year, Jared Butler, you know, he did get some minutes with the Wiz, but then they traded him to Philly because, you know, and he was killing it in the G League too. So, you know, it kind of just depends with this team. And like we said earlier, their rotation is so deep. It's going to be hard for those fringe guys to really stand out. Like, they're going to have to really go crazy. You know what I mean? So if that could happen, that would be awesome. Cause it would be dope if they keep getting guys like Champagny off of the G League to like actually become the mainstays, you know. That'd be amazing. That show that they can really work the margins and develop talent in unheralded areas, you know. But we'll see if Jones could be that next guy, you know. If I had to predict, I would say I think he's gonna spend more time in the G this year by far. You know, but we'll see. But anyway, moving on. Going off of that, how do you think this rotation is going to look? You said earlier, Champagny, you don't think he'll be in the 8-9 man. I think Champagny could be the 9th man. I mean, I think he should be. I mean, they just paid him. So my opinion, he should be. But how do you see like the kind of 8, 9 man rotation rolling for at least the first couple months?
I mean, I could tell you what I think it will be versus what I think it should be. I think, I mean, the starting five seems to be pretty clear just based on who Keith decided to start when he had a full roster available in the first and third game, which was Bub, CJ, Keyshawn, Middleton, and Sar. And again, Bilal Coulibaly is the wild card here because he'll come back in 2 weeks and you'll see if he decides like, okay, he's going to start, like, but then could you move back to the bench? And so that's got to, factor in as well, because someone who's in the rotation to start the year will probably be out once Bilal comes back. But I think that's the starting five. And then based on, in that first preseason game, based on who really played most of the first half before the starters came back in, you saw a lot of Corey Kispert. You saw Bagley, obviously, as that guy who started against New York, who played the most backup minutes against, Detroit. He'll be the backup center, I think, to take Sar out. And then when you look at the rest of the roster, it's kind of Trey Johnson, and that's kind of who I'm like fully confident in. Like Trey played very, a lot of minutes in the first 3 preseason games. Was usually that guy that came in for Bob or for CJ off the bench. And then you kind of have this like question mark of who's that ninth man, because Keith doesn't typically like to go 10 deep or 11 deep.
Right.
I honestly also don't think that's like sufficient in the NBA. I think shorter rotations are just better. I think that'll be Cam Whitmore's spot. I mean, you were at training camp, but from what I saw, it seemed like he played pretty well. In the preseason on the both ends, defensively especially, I liked his activity and what he did. You just traded for him, and you didn't give up that much for him, but you clearly made you made the move for a reason. It's not a move that you had to make, so they clearly like him. I just think he's gonna be that ninth guy, and you can make an argument for Champagnie. I'm the biggest Champagnie truther. When they signed Champagnie, I became a Champagnie truther because I just liked his game. And he's just been so solid. It's the same thing that you mentioned with Jared Butler, where every time they play, they seemingly make good things happen on both ends of the floor. So it's like really hard for me to sit here and say that he shouldn't be a part of the rotation. But I think that you give Whitmore the opportunity. I think he's played good in his minutes and in training camp to earn the opportunity. So I think that would be the 9-man. You have Champagnie kind of lingering. Will Riley gave Brian Keefe something to think about, but I still don't think it was enough to warrant him getting a spot in the rotation. Which sucks because these guys are talented and like they should probably be playing. And then you got to factor in, like I mentioned, when Bilal comes back, like someone's probably going to get bummed down from that. And like, who is it? He's a wing. Are you taking Corey Kispert, who is making $13 million this year, out of your rotation? Are you going to take Cam Whitmore out of your rotation? That moves Champagnie and Riley further back. So it does suck in the beginning of the year. It's going to be like this, but if they do make some moves to clear some older veterans on the roster at some point, hopefully the rotation, figures itself out. But that's who I'd say, as of now, I think Whitmore would be that 9th man.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they can't like not play Whitmore. I don't know. He has way too high of an upside, and like you said, it was a great trade for him. And he's looked good. I mean, he's been playing defense in the preseason, which has been really good to see. And that was kind of the book on him was like, he's a really talented scorer, but the defense wasn't there, the past couple of years with Houston. He didn't get a ton of playing time, but for the minutes he did play, that was the book on him. And now he looks like, he's been playing like a real two-way guy, which is, I know that's a big Dawkins thing, with the Wiz. So that should definitely align with their vision. And I remember Champagnie told, Bijan Todd the other day at Monumental, like, this guy Whitmore is amazingly athletic. He's like, I've never seen anyone this athletic, like, and from what I've seen, it's true. I mean, this guy is an amazing spark plug, talent wise, I think he can kind of score any way you want, basically. He can get to the rack. He can shoot. He's explosive. He can dribble. He can overpower you. He's a big guy, So I'm excited about him. And I definitely think he needs a spot. I think that Champagnie will get more minutes, when and if they deal Kispert. I think that Kispert's kind of blocking Champagnie a bit right now because they're kind of the same position. But like you said, Kispert's making $13 million. Like, you're not going to send him down to the G, So, he's one of the higher paid players on the team. So, It's just the kind of the reality of the game that Kispert's going to get his minutes. He's a vet, you know, and like you said, Kispert, you know, he did some good things in the preseason. He did well against Detroit in the first half. You know, he can shoot. He looks more aggressive. Like he said, that was a goal for him. I think with Kispert, he's a guy where it's like they can't keep everybody. You know, at some point, some things are going to have to shake, you know, especially like you said with Bilal coming back. The rotation's already crowded without Bilal. So it's like crazy because it's like, you know, Bilal's obviously a core piece that he has to get his minutes too. So and that's probably going to be the hardest part of the Wizards, you know, like for the Wizards brass this season is figuring out the minutes, you know, for figuring out how they divide all that up. Because like you said, I don't think playing 11 guys in every game is going to really be productive. It's too much switching. Guys can't get in rhythm. Too many subs, you know. So I think, like you said, your same starting lineup. You know, obviously, you know, Trey's going to be in there. Whitmore, like we said, Bagley to take Sarr off the bench, and you know, I think that Champagny will still be like at the end of the roster, like the last guy. To be honest, maybe not get a ton of minutes in the beginning, but I think he'll get more. Well, he'll be one of those guys that gets more as the season goes along. Just because, you know, now he's not a two-way player anymore. So, you know, they're not going to like keep sending him down right now. Now he's on a real contract, a standard contract. And I think he's a guy that also needs to be somewhat involved, you know, just because he made that graduation already from being a two-way guy. So, yeah, but it's going to be challenging. So I think that's kind of the most interesting storyline for the Wiz so far is like, how does their rotation shake out? But it's a good problem to have because that means they have a lot of talent, which hasn't always been the case, right? So performance predictions, you know, now we talk about the minutes. Who do you think is going to play the best? You can start off with the first half and then do after that the whole season.
I mean, I like don't want to keep saying Keyshawn George for all these like good awards, but just like everything he showed so far, I heard he's been a pretty vocal leader throughout the summer and throughout training camp. Played really well in summer league, looked terrific in preseason. It just makes sense for him to take a leap in his second season. So I'm very excited for what he can do. I think he's going to have a pretty successful year. I also think based on all indications of what I saw in preseason that CJ McCollum's also going to have a good year. I mean, he just seems like the offense works a lot for him, especially in the half court. He's able to get to his spots it's so fun to watch him like work on offense because he has so many loops, so many counters at this point in this 13th season. And it's so great that Trey gets to learn from a guy like him, a scorer like him. So I'm excited to see. I think he's going to do really well with this team and this offense. And those are kind of like the starters. And then I already talked about Bagley a little bit. I just think he's such a good complement to Sarr. Like when he comes in for Sarr, it's not like the drop off is that steep. I think that maybe rim protection wise it is, but he's still able to clear both glasses. I think he's way more active on the offensive glass. And I think offensively, he gives you a guy that can get a bucket. Like I think Bagley has developed that in his game where I'm confident if he gets the ball down low, he's gonna do something with it versus, you know, a guy like Tristan where you're still a little iffy. He could have an unbelievable offensive game, but you know, I'm just, you know, Bagley's consistency in the preseason, his first stint in Washington was good as well before they traded him. So I would say those guys I'm really excited about. In terms of, I wouldn't call it a concern. I'm just iffy on Bub. And again, I've probably been one of the more like be patient guys with Bub because you have people jumping off ship because they don't like that a 20-year-old point guard is struggling to make reads in the NBA as a 20-year-old point guard. Like he's gonna take time, but that's one I'm definitely looking forward to see like how he progresses because with Poole, it did take him a while as well, and so I would assume for Bub it's gonna take even longer just because he's way younger. He doesn't have the experience. It's a new position, so I'm not necessarily watching because I'm concerned about Bub. I'm watching because I'm genuinely like curious. How are you going to progress this season as point guard? I think by game 82, you'll look at him and say, he's gotten a lot better and he's making a lot better reads and he's running the offense better. So that's another thing I'm looking forward to performance wise to see how he progresses throughout the year. But definitely really excited for Keyshawn. I think he's going to make a really big leap this year.
Yeah, it's funny because Keyshawn was the one that didn't make the Rising Stars team. You know, Bub and Bilal and Alex made it. But now it's like, I think he's going to be a lot to make the Rising Stars, you know, if he keeps this up. And honestly, I mean, he just looks like one of the best players on this team, you know, already. And he's only, you know, what is he, like 21, you know? So, I think that he's exciting just because he's another guy, right, that was drafted outside the lottery. They actually traded up to get him, you know, with the Knicks for a couple picks. But, you know, he was a guy last year where it was like kind of with the same storyline as like Will Riley. Like, okay, maybe he might spend time in the G. Like maybe he'll come on later. He ends up being like one of the main rookies, you know? And it's like, second half of the season, I think after they traded Kyle Kuzma, you saw him really make a jump, you know, and that was really good to see. And now it's like, all right, this guy is showing the most as like a two-way guy out of, I think, the Wizards' young guys so far. He kind of has a pretty complete game. He doesn't really have a major weakness, you know, from what I'm saying. I mean, last year he wasn't hitting his threes that well, but I'm not really worried about that. I mean, he did that great in Miami, you know, so, it's kind of the thing where it's like, okay, Keyshawn is a guy that you kind of can't really attack him on any big weakness, you know, right? Like with Bub, right? Like he still needs to get to the rim more. He still needs to make better reads, like you said. Like he's still not all the way there yet. But with Keyshawn, it's like, I don't really see a major weakness already. And he's only going into his second season. So imagine like how he'll be in year 4 or 5. I think he could be one of the best young guys in the NBA, you know? So that's really exciting for the Wiz. So yeah, I agree. Keyshawn is also my main dude, but I think I really believe in Sar, man. I think that from what I saw in the preseason, like I think he's really learned that he needs to use his body inside, you know, and that's really good to see because I think, you know, you've seen how effective even over the summer he had like 8 blocks or something. He was just like going crazy at the rim on both ends, you know. And I think Sar is going to really come on this season as well, which is good to see. I think that Alex and Keyshawn are both kind of starting to get it. And I think, like you said, you know, Bub still has time. He's 20. I definitely think, you know, he's popped out also before, like, that Miami game to end the season last year. You know, I think against the Magic, he had like a 30-point double-double almost. But Bub is a guy that, you know, is still like lagging behind those two a little bit. So I think he's a guy that, like you said, is one to watch for. But Sar and Keyshawn, I think, are two guys that are kind of really starting to get it, in my opinion, you know? So that's pretty exciting for the Wiz. But yeah, I think as well, like another dark horse guy to perform this season, towards the end of the season, I think Will Riley will start doing more things like he did with the Knicks game in like February, March. You know what I mean? Like we said, like once the trade deadline passes, once the rotation changes, I think like we said earlier, Riley and Shenpenny, that's my prediction. Like those guys are really going to make their mark, you know, towards the end of the season. I think that Riley is going to kind of be similar to Keyshawn last year. Not the exact same because I do think he'll spend more time in the G. Keyshawn didn't go to the G at all. But I think that Riley is going to really make his mark towards the end of the season and show that, all right, the Wiz have a whole bevy of young guys that are just kind of going crazy. And that's going to be really good to see. But now, in terms of the next topic, I want to hear what is your main goal for this season, right? Obviously, last year they were developing Bub and Keyshawn and Alex. You know, these young guys, they kind of cleared the books over the off season, trained Jordan Poole and Sadiq Bey. So, what's your main goal? Like, what do you want to see the most out of this year?
It's development again. Like, I think that if you asked Will Dawkins, he'd probably say the same thing, is just development. How do I describe this? Like, it's getting to a point where if you're a Wizards fan, just like, I get it. Like, yes, it's about development, but like, show me something. Like, give me something. Like, if Keyshawn just has, you know, a terrific leap, like I think he could have, and Wizards fans are like, okay, like, we're going to lose a lot of games this year, but like, next year we have a legitimate piece to build around. I feel like for like OKC, it was always like, we're still losing, but like, we have this guy. Like, Shea is really good. And like, J-Dub looks terrific. And like, this year might be bad again, but we're going to be good next year. We're going to add some bets. And so hopefully the Wizards give something to like cling on to, some hope, because like last year was just going out there and like playing and losing. And you had some big games from like Bub and Sar, but realistically, it was just difficult to continue to watch this team knowing the result and knowing that like, yeah, the rookies are like solid, that Bilal is good, but they didn't have like that, okay, this guy is tremendous night in, night out. So hopefully that shows itself, but it's going to be all about development. You know, you have, I don't know how many first round picks on this team. Some they drafted, some they didn't, but in terms of who they drafted, like it was 2 this year. It was what, 4 the year before, if you're considering AJ Johnson, kind of 5, if you're considering Dylan Jones. Then you obviously have Bilal from the year before, Whitmore from the year before. Just like what, 8, 9 guys that were first round picks in the last 3 years. You have a lot of young guys. It's all about development. So you just want to see these guys take the next step. Like Bilal Coulibaly needs to be able to shoot the basketball with, you know, competence, but also be a compatible shooter. He needs to be able to make guys respect him on that end. That's something that I'm looking for. If Keyshawn George continue the preseason play, can he be a guy that maybe could be an on-ball guy later in his career? Can Bob Carrington actually be a point guard? That's something that I'm very looking forward to. Can Alex Sarr be a true center? Can he rebound the ball? Is his shot type going to be good where he's not taking like 5, 6 threes a game, but he's still able to stretch the floor? It's kind of these little bit like mini leaps, I guess, and hopefully a big leap from one of them that you're kind of looking at. And also, obviously, the goal is to loosen up to keep the pick. Darren Peterson looks phenomenal at Kansas. You have the Boozers, you have Divansa. There's a lot of really good guys at the top. And if you're a Wizards fan, you know that just because you lose all your games for the most part doesn't mean you're going to get a good pick. They obviously went the second worst team. They got the worst pick they could have gotten in 6. Got Trey Johnson, which is awesome. I'm really excited for him. But that's another main goal. I think that the moves reflect that they're not trying again to win many games this year. Same with Utah, same with Brooklyn. And so I think it's going to be one more bad year, like one more really bad year where they're around 18, 20 wins. And then the following year, I think it should shift gears to like, let's try to win some games. Let's try to compete. Maybe not contend, but compete. So I think it's about development. I think it's about keeping the pick. I think, you know, obviously accumulating assets as well. We're going to talk about free agency in a bit, but that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, no, I think you put it in a great way. I think I want this year to set up next year. What I mean by that is, right, like we said, the young guys got to get better. But also, I want the team to show a whole step forward from last season. Not necessarily a lot more wins, but just don't get blown out as much. I think, you know, I think about the game last year against Indiana where they lost by like 60, you know. I don't want to see games like that this year. You know, I think there's not as much of an excuse this year because last year the team wasn't, you know, it wasn't as advanced as it is now in terms of the rotation and the young guys, you know, a lot of these guys being in year 2, year 3, you know, it was kind of like, you know, Poole doing a lot of work on offense, then like a lot of rookies or you know, belong in a second year, you know, so it was even more raw. Now they're still raw, but it's like, I think they need to be, you know, making games close towards the end, you know, I want to see the competition from that standpoint. And like you said, right, like I didn't mention this earlier, but you just did, how Coulibaly, you know, his jumper, I think this is a critical year for him with that, because next year you start thinking about the extension and they have like a million other young guys, right? So that's where it's going to really start getting tricky. Like even Dawkins even said in his presser, like not everybody's going to be all these guys are going to be on the team forever, you know? So you're going to have to start making some tricky decisions. Like this guy was kind of their first piece of the rebuild, right? He was kind of their first pick of this new administration. Now he could be phased out if he doesn't get the jumper right, because in today's NBA, you know, I was talking to somebody about this recently. Like it was great in like 2005, you were just a defensive wing, you know, but in today's NBA, it's like you gotta hit threes. If you're open, you just have to, you know, unless you're like a Rudy Gobert or something or like one of those builds. But as a forward or as a guard forward, you know, like you have to be able to sink open shots at a decent rate. And I think, you know, Coulibaly's defense is already there. Like you've seen guys like Curry and guys around the league talk about how good he is at defense, but it's the shot. Like if he can get the shot and that makes defenses have to work harder on their spacing, you know, like, you know, spread more of the floor, you know, if they can sag off of him and he bricks, right, it's like not going to be great for the Wizards offense, you know? So that's something I really want to see. We already touched on guys like Sarr and George.
But yeah, I think this season needs to set up next year and like, okay, the young guys take another leap, another step forward. And then on top of that, it shows that if you add, you know, some guys like in free agency, you add the rookies, you know, like Darren Peterson or, you know, one of those guys they mentioned earlier. This team is going to be seriously competitive. Not in the terms of like being a serious playoff team, but like, you know, completing for a playing spot, you know, winning games. This year, like you said, has to be the last year that's heavy on losing. You know, I think next year they need to be, you know, at least maybe a few games under 500, something like that, you know, maybe 500 even, you know. So if you get guys like Keyshawn, Alex, you know, and like we said, Trey Johnson, you know, really coming on, especially at the second half, that's going to be enough to show that, all right, they're getting ready now. Like after next year, they add more pieces. They're going to be like pretty legit, you know? And so, and going off of that, going into 2026, man, you know, I know it's early to talk about this, but it's kind of tantalizing. I wrote about it recently. The Jordan Poole trade, right? Like I said earlier, it cleared the books. So Kispert's their only deal. Kispert and Champagny are their only deals scheduled on the books next year that aren't rookie deals, right? And that's kind of amazing. You're gonna have like 140 million under the first apron, which is like wild. You know, most teams don't have that. Most teams don't even have 40 million, you know? So 140 million under the first apron. There's going to be guys like Cam Thomas on the Nets, Kobe White on the Bulls, you know, Colin Sexton even with the Jazz. Like these guys are scheduled to be unrestricted free agents, you know, unless they get re-signed. But I don't want to say predictions, but do you think the Wizards can land a splashy free agent like that, or is it still too early?
I think so. I mean, I think the way that it'll play out, I think they have so many draft picks, like so many first round picks, that I don't know if they're like star hunting necessarily. I think that they might bank on at least next year. We have all these guys. We maybe need some veterans instead of trading for these bad contract veterans like McCollum and Middleton and Marcus Smart. Go out and sign someone that fits your team on a team friendly contract. And you know, again, Tobias Harris will be a free agent. You saw how his presence and Tim Hardaway's presence kind of changed the way that Detroit played basketball. You obviously had Houston signing Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet. So I think maybe some moves like that. And again, it's not the splashiest free agency. Like LeBron could very well retire and KD's going to probably sign an extension. If that's the case, the funny thing is the two guys in free agency next year that are making the most right now are McCollum and Middleton, who are on the Wizards. So again, that kind of shows like it's not the greatest free agency class of all time. But like you mentioned, there are some interesting pieces like Anthony Simons. He's still 26. He'll be 27 next year. He'll be a free agent. The Wizards have the money that they could throw at him if they're like, you know what, we want another scoring guard. John Collins will be 29. That's another interesting piece that you could look at. Rui will be a free agent, which I think would be really funny. And guys like Mitchell Robinson with New York, that'll be available. You mentioned Kobe White, Robert Williams. They're all guys that'll be under 30 and that I think could realistically come in and help the Wizards at some point, kind of change the way they play, maybe affect the culture as well. So, you know, those are maybe some options, but they have the space, like you mentioned. So definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, because the way I think about it, right, is like you mix in, like we said earlier, some of those vets you could sign, as well as, you know, the guy whoever you get with your lottery pick, you know, and once you add that to a core that, you know, has another year under their belt, maybe Keyshawn, like we said, takes a leap, like we already said, like that, I think you have the ingredients for like a really, you know, especially in the Eastern Conference is weaker than the West. So it's like, you should have the ingredients to challenge for the 8th seed next year, you know, like, I don't think that's crazy to say. And, you know, you mentioned guys like, you know, like Tobias Harris. I think that those kind of guys are good. You know, they're good culture guys. They're, you know, they set the tone. That'd be more of like a cheap guy, but I think I like to see the Wizards, you know, make a big money deal for a guy under 30. A guy like Cam Thomas really intrigues me just because I think he's definitely going to leave Brooklyn. And I think the Wizards, in terms of financially, they'll have as much money as they want to offer him. You know, he could go to, you know, a championship contending team for less probably if he wants. But if he wants to really cash in and make a bag while still being on a good young team that he can grow with for a few years, the Wiz could be a good option for Cam Thomas. You know what I mean? Same goes for Kobe White, you know? So
I'm intrigued to see what they're gonna do, and maybe they'll just stick to like maybe a more quiet thing, like, maybe they just get some decent vets, some older guys like they've been getting already, like McCollum, but on cheaper deals. That's fine too. And depend more on the guys they drafted or the guys they got in trades like Whitmore, But I think that, in terms of the next phase of the rebuild, which is what I wanted to get to, I think the next phase is making kind of a big free agent move, big vet move, It could be a trade or free agency, but getting a guy that's not just here for a year or two, who's not just here as like a placeholder, you know what I mean? Or just taking on a bad deal or getting a pick out of him. It's like a guy that's actually in the equation for a while. It'd be nice to see a vet be a part of that, just because that shows me the rebuild is advancing. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, no team wins a chip just off a team that they drafted 100% or something, right? The draft is vital, but we can branch out a little bit, right? So, that was kind of my vision there. But yeah, I think the Wiz are in a very exciting place. And in terms of my prediction for next year, I think obviously they're going to make sure they keep the pick. Hopefully they get one of the top three, like we said, DeBonsa, Peterson, or Boozer. And then I do think they'll at least offer guys like Kobe White, for example, guys who can get you 20 points a game for the next few years to add on to what you already have. You know what I mean? In terms of what you think, do you think they'll maybe stick to a more chill approach, like just get another cool vet like Tobias or others, and depend more on the guys they drafted?
I mean, it depends. Like, Washington again hasn't been like this big destination, so I think maybe they'll have to work along the margins again. Like, there's not a big name free agent realistically in this class. Like I mentioned, like I think KD is going to sign an extension. You don't know. Like, LeBron is the biggest name, but again, he's not coming to Washington, and I would also assume if he doesn't retire, he'll be back in LA, or he'll join like Dallas or something like that. So there's not like that splash move. The Wizards have in space. I think realistically speaking, maybe they look to do what like an Indiana did, where they were like, we're a small market, we have cap space, but we're realistically not going to attract these big games. Let's trade for Siakam. And that completely revolutionized their entire process, their entire roster, and just took them from a team that was like always like solid to a team that was ready to go to the NBA finals. So I think via trade is possibly the way they use it. And again, maybe they just say, we'll take back even more bad contracts. Like maybe they just say, we have this space. What other bad deals do you have? We can take it on our books because we have that space now that we traded Poole. And if you can give me another first, like maybe they try to do it like that, to where they take back those contracts and they can use all these assets they've accumulated to acquire a guy that takes up some cap space. I think that maybe makes more sense to me. Like you mentioned Cam Thomas, I mentioned Anthony Simons. KP is a free agent. He's going to be 31. It's a pretty mediocre class, to be honest. Like I don't think this would be the class I choose to have this much cap space in, but that's a good thing to have for the Wizards. You can go a lot of different ways. I think the fact that their books are cleared is nice. Like at this point, next year, Corey Kispert at 13 mil will be making the most money on this roster. Sorry, right behind him at 12. That's a good thing for a team that has a bunch of young guys, because you're not really beholden to your books. You can do whatever you want. And so I'm excited to see, what Dawkins can do along the margins and trades, and what he can do in terms of the draft. But I'm excited to see with cap space what him and Wenger can do in free agency, whether they do that via trade, I guess, or via just signing players.
Yeah, I think it's vital that they do something. Like, it's a good point you made about trades. Yeah, trade would also be a great way to use the cap. This front office has shown that, they can make decent trades. But my main thing is, like, you traded Poole, right? And, the Poole return wasn't, like, amazing on paper, right? You got McCollum on expiring deal. You got, like, a second round pick, it wasn't anything crazy, but it was for the money. It was for to clear the books, right? So it's okay. Now that you cleared it, you gotta, like, really do something nice with that. You know what I mean? Not just, like, take on a bad deal and call it a day again. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that works to, like, get out of the rut there and work the margins, you know what I mean? To kind of rebound from other things that happened, like the Bradley Beal contract before, and, kind of, it helped them get out of the rut they're in. It helped them land Will Riley, for example, getting Marcus Smart, stuff like that's great. Helped them land AJ Johnson, with Kuz. But, I think that whether it's trade or free agency, they kind of have to do something next offseason because they're going to have such a financial advantage, and that the team is going to kind of be ready to take somebody else on besides just the drafted guys, you know, or besides Champagne as well, you know. So it's like, whether it's, and that's a great example you made of with Siakam. Like, it can really change your program, you know. And it's like with the Wizards, they've shown that they can, you know, help develop guys like how much better Keyshawn's already. But you also can get a guy that's 26, 27, you know, like you say, Anthony Simons, like, you already know that this guy is like a legit NBA talent. And like you said, the free agency class isn't anything crazy. They're not going to get KD and LeBron, but that's fine. Like, you can get a guy that's 26, 27 who can give you 20 a game plus, and, you know, maybe is a good two-way guy as well. And it's like, you, at the end of the day, every championship team has guys like that. You know what I mean? So, I think that whether it's free agency or trade, the Wizards are going to have to do something bigger next offseason in that respect. And that's going to be kind of the first time this front office will be in that position. And the Wizards have never been a huge destination, but you don't have to be a huge destination to land Kobe White, I don't think. You know what I mean? Like, you just give the guy a bag and, you know, you give him some playing time. That's fine. It's like, they don't need to be like the A-list kind of thing yet, because they're just building it on their own, with their own resources. And, as long as they, you know, they compete for like an 8th seed type of thing next year, you know, with a good roster, and then from there they keep going, I think that's all you need, man. But did you have any other closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just more so looking at the free agency class, and I guess I'm curious to see how they approach it. I think there's a lot of different ways, and I think in the past the Wizards did go for those big names. Like, they made a move to get KD. They tried their best to get Paul George. You know, John Wall talked about it. Like, in the past, they really did try. I'm curious to see if they do that now, or if they sit back and say, let's find some other pieces. Like, maybe when we're at like OKC level, we can go for that. But the Thunder really didn't do that. Like, what big name free agents do they have? They signed Hartenstein, who was just a really smart signing. They traded for Caruso. They didn't need those big names because they developed the big names. They developed all NBA guys in Shea. They developed J-Dub. Chet is an all-defense guy that they drafted and developed. Their roster is so good because of what they did in the draft, where they didn't need to make these splash signings. Like, I don't think the Wizards need to, just because they have the cap space to do that. I'm curious to see what Will Dawkins does in terms of, like, we have the space, but let's use it smartly. Let's just not go and blindly spend. And so I'm excited to see what he can do next offseason in terms of that.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned OKC, because obviously Dawkins comes from that organization, right? And I think it's a safe bet to say that he'll kind of use their mindset and with his operation. So yeah, I don't think Dawkins is gonna, you know, try to throw a bag at KD or something. You know, I think that, you know, I think he'll look for, you know, good younger talent, not like 21, but maybe like 26-year-olds, you know, and trade for, you know, and make savvy moves, like you were saying, like with Hartenstein and Caruso. I mean, those two alone just made that like the defense was crazy with those two, you know, and then Hartenstein with that, you know, with the floater and everything. But, you know, guys that will really add value to the team. And, you know, because my main point is that I just want them to not only take on other guys, non-drafted guys for bad contracts. I want them to make them a part of the equation next year is what I mean. So I think that's kind of what I keep harping on, is like, that'll be a clear progression in the rebuild. Okay, they've never done that yet. Now they're ready, right? And so that's exciting, man. But yeah, but before that, you know, we got this season. You got guys like Keyshawn and Sarr developing, giving excitement. Someone I didn't even talk about really much yet was Trey Johnson. I think Trey Johnson could be the best shooter on the team by the end of the season. You know, if they say they trade McCollum and Middleton, you know, I think when March and April rolls around, you might see Trey already the most efficient 3-point shooter on the team. And that's exciting because I think he can be a guy that could shoot 40% from 3 in his NBA career. He looks really smooth, you know. I think that aspect of his game from Texas will translate well. And yeah, you know, he has to work on his defense, but again, he has time for that, you know. So, I mean, that's pretty much it, man. Thanks so much for coming on, Greg. By the way, Greg works for Bullets Forever, SB Nation, and you know, does great work in there, so go check him out. But yeah,
Greg, you had anything else you want to plug or anything before we go?
No, I just want to have people listen to Josh because he's very good at his job, and I'm very happy. Thank you again for having me on. Anytime you want to have me back, I'd love to just talk Wizard basketball with you. But make sure you're following Josh. That's the only thing I have to plug because Josh does great work. And then when it comes back around the summertime, you need someone covering the Mystics day in, day out. Josh is also there to cover them too. But the Wizards coverage has been great. He does great writing work as well. It's not just in terms of reporting. So keep it up. You're doing great. Really excited to see what you do this year. Excited to see what the Wizards can do. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Yes, sir. No problem. Appreciate that. Have a good one, bro.